In one of our live coaching calls within the Audio University membership, one of our instructors, Professor Gabe Herman, mentioned this trick to reamp a snare drum using a guitar amplifier. Let me show you how it works. First of all, I'll be using my live room downstairs to reamp the snare drum in the same room where I originally recorded the drums. That means I'm going to need a balanced line, so the signal going from my interface upstairs to my amp downstairs doesn't pick up noise along the way. I'll also need to bridge the low impedance output of my interface to the high impedance input of my amp. And to address both of these challenges, I'll use a radial reamp box. It takes a balanced line level low Z input and outputs high Z unbalanced instrument level. The idea here is to send the snare drum signal through the amplifier, placing a new snare drum, or the same snare drum tuned differently, in front of the amplifier, so the sound from the amplifier plays the snare drum with the dynamics and timing of the original take. I'll set up a send on the snare track within the DAW. That will go out of my interface directly to the reamp box downstairs, which is connected to the input of the amplifier. Then I'll place the snare drum on its side in front of the amplifier, with the resonant head facing away from the speaker, and Gabe recommends putting a blanket under the snare drum to help deaden unwanted rattling. Next, I'll place a microphone on the resonant head of the snare drum and connect that to an input on my interface. The connections from the interface to the reamp box and from the microphone to the interface could be made with simple XLR cables, but since I've got them in place already, I'm going to use these radial catapult devices, which carry balanced audio over shielded Cat5 cable, which is much cheaper than the equivalent number of XLR cables. I've got a full video on how these work linked in the description below this video if you're interested in learning more. The signal flow looks like this: DAW playback to interface output to reamp box to amplifier, amplifier through the snare drum and into a mic, and the mic is connected to the interface input, which is recorded to a new track in the DAW. This setup gives me a chance to adjust the tension of the snares, tune the drum differently, adjust mic placement, or even stack a few snare drums in a row and record them simultaneously. But if you do that, be sure to consider the time differences and align them later in the DAW. Once I find a good sound, I can record it back into the DAW session. And the great thing is, I can keep experimenting with this because I've still got the original performance recorded in the DAW.